Hi, I'm Greta, and welcome to my first video. I usually post a lot of video game related content here, but given the name of the channel and also what my original intent for this channel was, I figured today would be as good as ever to start sharing about my other passion, and that is reading. So today I'm going to be sharing with you all the books I read in 2024. I'm going to be giving you a brief synopsis of each of the books, followed by a little bit of my thoughts on the book. Now, the synopsis are going to be incredibly short, actually much shorter than what you would find on like Goodreads or like in the back book on the back jacket of a book. Just because I personally don't like to read synopses before going into books. I really like to go in fully surprised, and then after that, I'll share my brief thoughts on what I thought about it. I actually do have a book podcast, and if you would like to hear me talk more about that, then I will star the books that we actually discussed in the podcast. The name of the podcast is The Books We Meet in the Library, and my co-host is Millie from Into the Nook here on YouTube as well. Okay, without further ado, let's get started with the books I read in January. Okay, now January feels like an absolute lifetime ago, and it's really hard to believe that I even read these books because it was a year ago. It was actually a year ago. But the very first book I read in 2024 was Before the Coffee Gets Cold by Toshikazu Kawaguchi, and it was translated by Jeffrey Troslot. I am so sorry if I'm butchering the names. I promise I'm trying my best. Before the Coffee Gets Cold is a story about a cafe where you can travel back in time for the duration that your coffee stays warm. This book is incredibly popular, and I'm pretty sure a lot of you have already read it if you're in like the book space. But this was my first time reading it, and I knew really nothing going into it, and I really, really enjoyed it. There's a lot of other time travel logistics that go into it that make traveling back in time a little bit more difficult and more nuanced. The book is written up into a bunch of little vignettes or little stories, and I really, really enjoyed some of the stories, but other stories did not hit as hard as I wanted them to. So overall, it was a pretty good start to the year, but nothing absolutely like stellar and blew my mind, I guess. Although some stories were really lasting. Next book I read, which was actually oh my god, one of the first that was like a physical book. Like this is one of the few physical books I read this year. I am a notorious e-reader and audiobook listener. So yeah, one of the only books I read this physical books I read this year, and that is Paradise Rot by Jenny Halve. So our main character Jo is a student at a new school and is looking for a new place to live, and she ends up living in a house that has no walls, and her roommate also has zero boundaries. This book is an incredibly short read. It falls under the like weird girl, dirty girl book category. If you know what I'm talking about, then like you know the vibe. If you like the concept of a like literal rotting girl, you might like this. It's also very, very like, for lack of sounding cheesy, very punk rock. Okay. I really enjoyed that one. After that, I read A Song for the Wild Build by Becky Chambers, and this is a Hugo Award winner. And let me tell you, when I took like a sharp, like left turn, pivoting from A Paradise Rot to A Song for the Wild Build. Oh my gosh. This is an alternative reality where robots have gained self awareness and they have set out to live in nature. And our main character is a non binary monk who has decided that they no longer want to do their current job and are out kind of in nature, doing a little bit of like self discovery. This book will absolutely blow you away. It blew me away. It is definitely, this is like my number two favorite book of the year. I don't know how else to explain it besides this book will either make you feel less alone or give you an actual existential crisis. It did a little bit of both for me, and I did sob when I was reading this book. I have recommended this book to so many people in my life, and if you are in your like mid to late 20s and you're still trying to figure out yourself and what the meaning of everything is, I highly, 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 highly recommend reading this one. I absolutely loved it, and I thought this was going to be my favorite book of the year until we got to December and like everything changed, and like My entire perception like shattered. Also read this book in January. It was Talking at Night by Claire Daverly. Now, this feels, for some reason, out of all the books I read in January, this feels like the most distant. And I don't know what it is. I honestly think that this kind of story was overshadowed by another book that's very similar. So that's what I think about whenever I think about this like genre. Let me get into it. So, Will and Rosie are teenagers. They are opposites, but life keeps on bringing them back together, and back into each other. So this is like a contemporary kind of romance. This book is compared to Normal People by Sally Rooney quite a bit, except I think that Sally Rooney is able to put the same story, well, a very similar story, and add a lot more of a punch in a smaller book. Now, some might think that you're like losing a lot of details in having it be like a smaller text, like less words, literally. But I think that there's like a genius there in being able to share a story or write a story that has as much like, I don't want to say soul, but it really is. Like, it has so much nuance in such a small, concise way. I think that is absolutely beautiful. Which is why, I guess, if you're going to read the two, I suggest Normal People. So, February started off in a bit of a weird way with Couplets by Maggie Milner. So this is well a poem collection written in couplets, and it's a story about a woman on her journey into exploring her queerness and her sexuality. I will say this is very, very, very diary esque, and it is messy, 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 messy. And I honestly cannot remember a lot of the plot or a lot of what happened. But I will say that some of like the romance scenes in this are incredibly spicy, and I was like, whew, like they're written very well. In February, I also read Bride by Ali Hazelwood. Um, Again, very, very popular book. If you are in book talk, book YouTube world, you have probably come across this. But Misery is a vampire and is getting married to Lo, an alpha werewolf, to save their like family's alliance. I went into this so excited because I knew nothing about the Omegaverse. I still, well, kind of understand the Omegaverse and like what it is. But oh my gosh, this book is just a lore dump. It is kind of insane how much lore is being just like thrown onto you in this first book. This very much feels like a setup for all of the other stories or all of the other like partner novels that are to come in this Ali Hazelwood series. And this is not to say that I'm not an Ali Hazelwood fan, because I read, I believe, two or three more Ali Hazelwood books this year. Like, she is by far one of my favorite romance authors. But this one just did not do it for me. And I think it's because both of the characters are apart from each other for like 80% of the book. Like, they do not have a solid relationship. And like, I understand that they're like fated mates. But if it wasn't for them being fated mates, I don't think they would have ended up with each other. All in all, this was missing the incredible Ali Hazelwood banter that I'm so used to, and like look for and love and yearn for. After that, again, I took another sharp left turn and I read the sequel to A Song for the Wild Built, and that is A Prayer for the Crowned Shy. Now, this book picks off where A Song for the Wild Built left off, except it is from the robot's POV and its understanding and its engagement with the human world. And I liked this, but I did not like it as much as the first one. It was a lot more silly almost, and there was a lot more, it almost felt a little bit more like sitcom-y versus the first one, although still incredibly good story. At the ending is the ending of both of these books will just like, it rips you apart, and like, I want more, you know, I still want more of this universe. I want to know what happens and what like where we continue. But if you're gonna take anything away from this video, it's definitely to read both of those books. They are absolutely incredible, and there's so much like discussion to be had about this very, very like short novella that Becky Chambers gives us. It's quite incredible. The last book I read in February is arguably one of the most underrated authors. I love anything Christina Forrest puts out. And this was the second book in her like current series. It's called The Partner Plot. Oh my god, it's in the Green Sister series, and it's a incredible second chance romance. Okay, Christina Forrest, you can do no wrong by me. Like there's a couple romance authors that I absolutely adore, and I will absolutely read anything that they put out, and Christina Forrest is definitely one of those authors. So our main character Violet is a successful and iconic stylist to the stars, and she is currently undergoing a very public, very messy breakup. When a single misstep literally changes her entire life and she has to revert to going back to her hometown. Our love interest is Xavier, who is a high school teacher and a basketball coach in their hometown, and they kind of find themselves having to rely on each other to undo this very messy situation that they put themselves in. Now, this book is like the epitome of like second chance small town romance, where everybody knows everything about your business. I mean, these characters have been together since like high school. Obviously they're no longer together, and now they're coming back, and it is just delicious. The cast of like family members and other community members around them, I can only explain it as the muses in Hercules. They add, or like the other like the hotel employees in Mamma Mia. Like they add this beautiful comedic tone to this novel. It is so charming. Not to mention the two characters have absolutely insane chemistry. This book also has a ton of fashion and pop culture references, so if you are like a fashion girly who reapplies lip gloss like it's like your job, this one is definitely for you. In March, I only read one book, and that is Just for the Summer by Abby Jimenez. So in short, Justin and Emma both have the same problem. Every person they date finds the love of their life after they break up. When they decide to kind of come together and try to attempt to break this like curse, obviously romance happens. But not just like any romance. This is romance with nuance. Okay, Abby Jimenez, also another romance author that is able to write very nuanced love stories where both characters very much have like their own struggles, and they're kind of coming together and finding themselves while finding each other. It's beautiful. I will say this, a lot of content warnings, so definitely look into that prior to going into this book. But the subplot is so much better. Well, not better, rather I found the subplot to be just as valuable as their like romance plot, which is obviously like the main one. This is a very nuanced love story. If you like Emily Henry, then you will like this author's works. I very much liked it. It was really good. I'm excited for the next one that's gonna come out next year. Or this year. Oh, it's fast. April was a bit of a rough month when it comes to the books I read. So the first book I read is Everyone in My Family Has Killed Someone by Benjamin Stevenson, and I could not care much for this book. This is a whodunit with a huge family ensemble that takes place at a family reunion in a ski resort. I really did not care for it at all. I don't know if it was like the large cast or the large ensemble. Maybe it was the setting. I'm not entirely sure. I've read other whodunits and I've enjoyed them. I don't know. There was just something about this that I was just not vibing with. Now, the second book I read in April is the highly anticipated, both to me and to the general public, Funny Story by Emily Henry. Now, this book is wildly popular, so I probably don't have to say much about it, given that you probably have already read it as well. But just in quick synopsis, Daphne has just been dumped by her fiance Peter, for his childhood best friend Petra, and needs a new place to live. So what's a better place to live than with Petra's ex, Miles? Okay. I have read every other Emily Henry book since. Her first one, oh my god, I always forget which one the first book she released was. I always think it was the people we meet on vacation, but I believe it's book lovers, the people we meet. Anyways, I can't remember for the life of me. But I have read every single one of her books, and I genuinely really enjoy Emily Henry. This book, for some reason, I loved the premise whenever I heard of it, but this one for some reason just did not really stick with me. It is not one of my favorites by Emily Henry, and I don't know. I guess maybe it could be my fault. It could be that my expectations were like way too high for it going in. But it didn't like hit marks for me. Truthfully, a lot of romance fell flat for me this year. And I've read a lot of romance in the past that I have like resonated to my core to. There's actually one romance this year that I reread from last year that I love, even though I reread it. Like, we'll get to there. In May, I read one book, and that was The Paradise Problem by Christina and Lauren. Now, this is like the quintessential holiday, like summer holiday romance book that takes place on a tropical island. So quick synopsis. Anne Green thought she was marrying Liam Weston for access to subsidized family housing while at UCLA. Now, Anna is a starving artist living paycheck to paycheck when Liam appears at her door asking her to pretend to be his wife and be his plus one at the brothers' wedding. Vacation, tropical romance vibes. That's like my favorite type of summer romance. So like I don't know, I enjoyed it. Overall, very funny family hijinks and a solid fluffy summer romance. If you want something to read by the poolside, this honestly is a very good choice. In June, I also read one book. This was like my book drought, which you're about to see it like spike significantly. It's about to get real sad. But in June, I read Not in Love by Ali Hazelwood. This is an enemies to lovers where Rue, our main character, is a quote unquote biotech engineer at Klein, which is a very promising startup. And Eli and his business partners want to take ownership of Klein. Now, this might be the only Ali Hazelwood book where I have experience in the subject matter. And I can tell you right now, no corporate takeover has ever been this sexy, and it's not even like funny. It's the absolute lack of professionalism between our two main characters is quite hilarious to someone who like has worked in this industry. But it's not nearly as funny as like the palpable and like insane thirst they have for each other. It's crazy. It's not my favorites by far. My favorite thus far is Love Theoretically, but definitely a very good romance. July started my addiction with Heartstoppers volume, with literally all the Heartstoppers volume. But in July, I only read Heartstoppers volume 1. It was incredible. Let's jump to August because that's when I read the rest. So in August, I read Heartstoppers volumes 2 through 5. I read all of these in one night. I was actually having kind of a shitty, like self-loathing kind of night. You know, we all have those. And I was like, you know what? I'm gonna get out of this rut. Let me just read all of them, right? Like let me just find something to do. So I'm not just sitting in bed like doom scrolling. So I picked up I they were available for rent on Libby, so I checked out 2, 3, 4, and 5, obviously, and I finished them all in one night. And I kid you not, by the end, I had like tears just like running down my face into my ears because these graphic novels are just truly so absolutely just delicious. If you don't know, these are graphic novels and they're about the lives and times of two queer high school students and all of their friends. I love the representation in this book and I found it absolutely charming and captivating. I say about 90% of this book is a very sunny representation of the queer experience, and you have accepting parents and like incredible friends and families and everything's like sunshines and rainbows. But then the other 10% can hit on some pretty difficult stuff, and a lot of that is a lot of mental health related issues. And if you are like me and a girly pop that relates to that, then you will also just be like sobbing. And like the thing is, I didn't think that myself as like a grown woman would relate to these topics as being told through the lens of a high school, like a little high school gay boy, but I related to it and I was sobbing. However, I will say that I have heard from some people that the very sunny disposition of these books can be a little bit triggering if you are not in a situation where you are being as accepted, as welcomed for your sexuality or your queerness as the characters are in these books. I had never like taking it from that point of view, but I feel like that is a really valid and really important point of view. So I really wanted to share that as well, just in case this level of like sunshininess and acceptance is a little bit difficult to stomach. After reading all of Heartstoppers in like a night, the next thing I read was The Sweet Spot by Amy Papel, and honestly, there's like so much to say about this book, while also not a lot for me to say about this book. Now, I really don't want to spoil it, but I feel like the synopsis does it justice really well. But for this book, just think of the movie Valentine's Day, where like all the characters are interconnected, meets Modern Family. Now, the last book I read in August is arguably, no, it actually is in my top 5 for favorite books I read this year. It is Clap When You Land by Elizabeth Acevedo. This is a YA novel, and I'm always really hesitant going into YA. I never really know what to expect, but I absolutely loved this. So, like, on the surface, this is a story about two sisters who learn about each other's existence after a very tragic accident occurs. But in reality, this book is just so much more. Without spoilers, and I don't really want to get into the story too much, but there is so much love poured into it. Every detail, even the topics that are a little bit more difficult to discuss and talk about, are written with like the utmost respect. It is a story about self-discovery, familial relationships. It is also an immigrant story that I think will ring true to so many. And this is by far one of my favorite books of the year. I cannot stress enough how like earth-shattering this book was for me. I absolutely loved it. Sobbing by the end of it as well. In September, I read absolutely nothing by no one. So that's when the like height of my reading slump was. I just could not pick up absolutely anything, and that is okay. And you know what? Come October, I I don't think October did anything better for my reading slump, because I started off October with something that I really did not enjoy, and that is The Chilling Effect by Valerie Valdez. This is a campy space opera with a large cast of characters that get into a lot of hijinks while traveling through space and time. And I think that this type of genre is just not for me. I might give it one more chance in the future, but it was just too much of like, this happens, then this happens, then this happens, and plot twist, this happens, and then this. Like, if you're into that sort of thing, I love that, more power to you. But I just found it like a little bit overwhelming and also a lot to keep track of. I realize that makes me sound a little bit dumb, but like for the way that the style that this is written, I was also just like, like there's everything and the kitchen sink is in this book, and that was just like not for me. So after that, I read Bunny by Mona Awad. Now this is my second time reading this book, and I still struggle to like explain what this story is about. On the surface, it has all of the makings for a psychological horror, but there really is a lot more that goes to it. The best way I can describe my favorite aspects of this book is it's Mean Girls meets The Heathers with a touch of magical realism. If you want to enjoy this book, my biggest recommendations are going in smooth brain, no thoughts. That's literally it. Just everything, like, be able to like suspension of disbelief, be able to just like take everything as it comes and just accept things for what they are. I feel like that is the best way to enjoy Mona Awad's works. And I really enjoy Mona Awad's works, one of my like go-to authors. So that's my recommendation for this book. If you have not read it, I suggest you read it, because I truly think that this one lives up to the hype. Although we did make a podcast episode on this, and my co-host Millie absolutely hated this book, but I absolutely loved it. So I don't know, take that for what it's worth. Another Ali Hazelwood mention. This is Two Can Play. This was an audiobook. It's an enemies to lovers novella about two game developers. And I don't really like enemies to lovers that much. I never feel like it's like that high of a stake, and it's always very much like just a misunderstanding that could have been resolved over coffee or at the water cooler. But whatever, what Ali Hazelwood can do in such little words in a tiny little itty bitty novella is absolutely incredible. And again, anything she publishes I will be reading, so take that for what it's worth. It's a great little read. Now for the end of October, things got a little bit spooky, mildly spooky. This is a reread of The Dead Romantics by Ashley Poston. Ashley Poston is another author whose stories I absolutely love. Her contemporary romances, The Dead Romantics and The 7-Year Slip, are by far two of my favorite romances, and I recommend them to anybody who asks for any recommendations. But in short, Florence Day is a ghostwriter for an incredibly famous author, and she's having a really hard time writing the final novel. To make matters worse, her very attractive editor is not giving her an extension, so she has to pump that out. After receiving some rather devastating news, she has to go back to her hometown, and she meets an unexpected companion that challenges her outlook on life and helps her finish writing her book. Now, this book has so much heart. I absolutely love it. I think the romance between the two characters is incredible. Again, it's romance but with magical realism, and I love that trope. I don't know what it is. I just like a little bit of magic in my like day-to-day. This and again The 7-Year Slip are by far my favorite romances from Ashley Poston. Her release this year was very disappointing, and I actually DNF'd it, but we just won't talk about that. Now, the last book I read in October is absolutely unhinged and absolutely insane, and that is Midnight Sun by Stephanie Myers. So this is Twilight from Edward's POV, It is roughly 700 or so pages. And if you want 700 or so pages of a vampire complaining about being better than everybody else while simultaneously being so in shock and awe of a 17-year-old girl, then you need to read this book. If you lived for Twilight, if you live for Twilight and you just want more of this world, then you absolutely need to read this book. Was it a bit of like a hee hee ha ha funny read for me? Yes, it absolutely was. Did I enjoy it? Yes, I absolutely did. Um, will I read it again? No, I absolutely won't. Once was enough. Thank you very much. Come November, I literally felt like I was losing my mind and I was not going to meet my reading goal. I did what any rational person would do, and I read everything I could get my hands on. And if it didn't, like, if I started a book and it did not like grab my attention within like the first couple pages, within the first couple minutes, if it was an audiobook, then I just put it down and picked up something else. During this time, also a bunch of romance authors released very, very short holiday themed, holiday-esque novellas, and I ate those up. So, without further ado, in November, I started off November pretty good with Cruel Winter with You, again by Ali Hazelwood. Take a shot every single time I mention Ali Hazelwood. I believe this is the last time I will mention her in this like recap. But essentially, this is a holiday novella. It's a second chance romance about childhood friends. They get snowed in a cabin. There is a miscommunication. He fell first. He fell harder. If I was not driving around while I was listening to this audiobook, my toesies would have, like, my feetsies would have been fluttering and kicking, because oh my gosh, again, what Ali Hazelwood can do in a couple pages is absolutely earth-shattering. This was an audiobook release only, I believe, and I kid you not, this was like an hour and 30 minutes, and that's how long I was stuck in traffic on my way home from work. But neither here nor there, because I was having a great time like girling out to this amazing, delicious, holiday themed esque love story. So cute. After that, I read another holiday romance, and that is One Day in December by Josie Silvers. The synopsis of this book, like on Goodreads and such, does a really, really good job at explaining the book setup. But essentially, Lori is on her way home and sees a man sitting at a bus stop. They lock eyes and it's like instant love. She then spends an entire year looking for quote unquote busboy, only for her friend to present him as her new boyfriend at their annual Christmas party. Okay, incredible, beautiful setup. I loved the setup. I will say this is a very tumultuous second chance romance that spans many, 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 many years. This is, I think, a very human and very realistic representation of this kind of trope. The couple, like Lori and then busboy, they go through other relationships, they experience a bunch of other things. There's breakups, there's marriages, like it's a whole thing. They both live their respective lives and then at the end come back together, and it's very, very, very messy and it's very tumultuous, but I very much enjoyed it. I really liked this one. Controversial opinion. Again, we did a podcast episode on this and my co-host did not like it. I loved it. Say what you want. Say what you want. After this, I read Merriment and Mayhem, which is another holiday novella. Everly is in a very small town, dealing with her deceased grandmother's belongings in her home, and she is making like a batch of cookies when fire, and then 911 is called and there's a very hot fireman that comes and save the day. Okay, TBH, I didn't read the synopsis before going in because I mentioned at the front I don't really read synopsis going into the books, and this book is by Alexandria Bellefleur, and I thought this was going to be a sapphic romance because Alexandria Bellefleur has written other sapphic romances. The jump scare I got whenever I realized that this was a man, like the man was gonna be a love interest, I was disappointed by this reveal. The last of the romance, my romance arc, is Love and Other Conspiracies by Mallory Marlowe. This is a very cute love story about two people who work together and fall in love with each other while ghost hunting and looking for Bigfoot. That's all you need to know. This is when we get into my, oh, she has decided to lock in and has decided to go back to her roots. I read Rouge by Mona Awad. Now, again, it's really hard for me to do synopses of Mona Awad's works just because there's so much, but also it's so, all of her, okay, here's how I'm gonna explain this. Bunny feels like you are being covered by a like that synthetic white fluffy material, like that, like those like synthetic white fluffy pillows and stuff, like you're being smothered by that and it smells of roses. Rouge feels like you are walking through a red mist of like Chanel No. 5 perfume, or like through the fragrance aisle of a department store. That's what it feels like. That's what Rouge feels like. Honestly, this is a horror story about mother-daughter relationships and the lengths women will go to in order to remain appearing youthful. Do with that what you will. It's very, very good. But again, don't ask any questions. Don't ask any questions. Just go in and just accept the world for what it is. For the long-awaited reveal of what my favorite book of the year was. Now, this book was recommended to me by my best friend. And whenever she was recommending it, I was kind of like, okay, like maybe this might be something I'll read in the future. I'm not really sure how I feel about this like concept, but she kept on just recommending it to me. She was like, just try it. Just try it. I got it on a Libby hold, and I decided to give it a try, and it is my favorite book of the year. Incredible, show-stopping, so unique but also timeless, and that is Monstrillo by Gerardo Samano Cordova. Oh my gosh. Again, I don't want to spoil absolutely anything about this book because it is such a delicious read. This book has the potential of being a monster classic in the company of Frankenstein, Carmilla, and Dracula. Like, it has the potential of being that. But when you peel back the layers of just it being a creature of monster horror, this book is a beautiful story about queerness, about grief, about family, about loneliness, about love, and about sacrifice. It has so much soul to it. It's literally tangible. Never in a million years did I think I would be sobbing because of a little monster creature. But when I tell you, this book is just absolute perfection. The storytelling is delicious. The characters, oh my gosh, every single supporting character has a life of their own. And it's like, it just comes together so deliciously. It's this book, like, you can feel it, like I don't know how to explain it, and I hope I'm doing it justice. It's so tangible. I absolutely loved it, and I recommend this to anybody. If you aren't into horror, if that's not your thing, it's you give this a try. The same way that you had to read Frankenstein in grade school, you have to read this book. Like, this book could easily replace Frankenstein. If I was a college professor and holding a literature class, I actually took a class on monsters in literature, in like college. this book would be added to that list. It is so good. And now I feel like I'm overhyping it, but it also deserves its flowers. I'm gonna reread it this year. Now we are at December. So December was a bit of like a catch-all. I literally read a little bit of everything. One of the first book I read in December was A Love Story for Ricky Wilde by Tia Williams. This is a contemporary fated mates love story set against the backdrop of both modern day and 1920s Harlem. This book, the way that romance is written in this book will literally take your breath away. Nobody talks like this to each other in real life. You can't tell me they do. And if they do, I need to see it. In December, I also read Annibot by Sierra Greer. In simple terms, this is a story about a sex robot that gains consciousness under the surface. This is a fascinating character analysis about womanhood, autonomy, the power play and the power dynamics in relationships. This book left me thinking, like, I had thoughts while reading. No, like, this book has definitely left a lasting impression on me. I will say the ending was a little bit rushed, but that's okay. Everything else was so good. Never in a million years did I think I would be reading sci-fi like this, but I did, and I enjoyed it. I actually picked up this book because of the Goodreads Awards. The cover of it is gorgeous, and I was like, I need to read this. I need to read this. And so I did, and I loved it. Highly recommend it. After that, I decided that it was finally time for me to read honestly, this book has got a second wind this year. And that is White Knight by Dostoevsky. I don't know if I said that right. A man meets a woman and he falls in love and then helps her reconnect with the love of her life. I get the hype, but also I get a life. I don't know. I understand that the yearning is there, but also I don't know. I wasn't. I understand why classics are classics, and I respect classics for what they are, but I feel like maybe this is overhyped.
Child. Anyway, so
Okay, after that, I read a collection of poems by Warsan Shire, and that is Bless the Daughters Raised with a Voice in Her Head. Incredible. A collection of poems about immigration, trauma, womanhood. I cried reading the whole thing. It's incredible. Incredible. Amazing. Amazing. Actually, Warsan Shire actually worked with Beyonce on Lemonade. Visual on no, I don't it wasn't visuals. It was like some of the spoken word in the Lemonade. Incredible. Warsan Shire. I'm obsessed. I'm a fan. And then the last book I read in December is Anxious People by Frederick Backman. Now I did not think I was gonna finish this book, but I actually finished this book on New Year's Eve. I read the version translated by Neil Smith. This is a story of a bank heist turned hostage situation, but it is so funny. This also made my top books of the year. Um the characters in this book are so funny. The stories are so charming. There's so much compassion and again so much like soul and nuance and the topics that it touches on about, depression, grief. There's just so much that this book has to offer when you peel back the layers of this like of what the setup is or how the characters came to this situation. Again, one of my favorite books of the year. I absolutely loved it. And that is everything I read this year. If you stuck until the end, thank you. Thank you so much for being here. I hope this gives you a bit of an introduction into the books that I like to read and my taste in books and a little bit of my personality. I plan on releasing 2 YouTube videos a month. One will be video game related and the other one will be book related. So if you would like to see more of that, don't forget to subscribe. I also stream cozy games over on Twitch, and occasionally we do some Lego building. So if you'd like to join my amazing community over there, I will post all of my socials in the description box. Okay, well, that is everything for today. Thank you again. Don't forget to be excellent to each other, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.